Yeah. So when people kind of try and compare it to, a Kodak moment or whatever, I think this is way beyond that. We're talking at a minimum a 4x increase in every knowledge worker's productivity. I would probably place it at 10x or even higher than that. And so what we think about then is that when you've got workers who are 10 times as productive every day, that pretty soon you're going to start thinking as an entrepreneur or a business owner or a CEO, do we really need more humans in our organization if every human is 10x as productive every day?
The Tech Seeking Human podcast is a podcast about AI developed by humans. We're asking the big questions. Is AI going to cure cancer? Is it going to make our lives better? Will it help us improve our jobs? Or will it eliminate them altogether? Potentially even eliminate humans altogether.
Dave, you and drama.
Well, it's possible. So we set off on a journey to interview some of the brightest minds in the world. TED Talk speakers, thought leaders, keynote speakers, authors, journalists, people like
Max Tegmark, Trisha Wong, Hannah Fry, the list goes on.
See, Max actually thinks that the AI could potentially wipe out the human race.
Well, less than 50%.
Join us for the Tech Seeking Human podcast. Subscribe now, hit the like button. It's been a year since we caught up. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. I feel like things have been exponential since then. It's a word that's being used a lot at the moment, of course, but I think the pace of change has never been faster and will never ever be this slow again. So it's a crazy time.
Why? This is in the last year. Like, what's the change?
Well, so I'm in Melbourne, hanging out here with you, of course, and I was giving a presentation to the board of CPA Australia yesterday on, of course, the rise of generative AI, to ask the question and engender a dialogue around what's the future for accountants and what's their role in an age where generative AI and, of course, machine learning is doing and excelling at numbers, data, logic, reconciliation, etc. Right? But I think the big pronouncement here is just the exponential pace of change when it comes to generative AI and just how sophisticated it gets. To give you an example in the world of accounting, ChatGPT last year passed the CPA exam with 85.1. Now, if you haven't sat the CPA exam, that's very, very impressive because that places it in the top 10% of all human candidates.
Wow.
Right? And this is a few weeks after ChatGPT had failed the CPA exam.
Wow.
So artificial intelligence, it fails, it learns, and all of a sudden it's within the top 10% of all performers. And of course, it's also now, I was doing work with the Law Society recently. It also passed the New York bar exam with flying colors as well. So this is what's happening. It's disrupting everything. And of course, the other thing here is that this leads to the internet fundamentally changing from something that used to be, while it felt digital, it was still based on organic human content.
Yep.
The age of the organic internet is now over because we're replacing it with a synthetically generated, content-filled internet instead.
You're hitting on some big topics because the promise of AI was that it was going to come in and remove mundane tasks. And when I think of mundane, I think potentially of accounting. Like, no one likes doing their tax return every year. And if that can be automated by a robot, and apologies to anyone who is an accountant who's going to be offended by this, but it's not a bad industry to disrupt because there are set rules in which the AI follows. And now from the legal profession that you just mentioned, great, we don't have to deal with lawyers anymore. It's probably a really good thing. And hopefully I'm not offending any lawyers out there.
I'm a trained lawyer, yes, I don't take any
But you
offense.
saw the light.
I saw the light, yes.
But these industries, it's no surprise to me that they're asking you to come in. How ready are these boards and these companies for this change? Is this like an iPhone disruptive moment where the apps came in and all of a sudden they just went, oh my God, we're not ready?
I think this is bigger. Yeah. So when people kind of try and compare it to, a Kodak moment or whatever, I think this is way beyond that. We're talking at a minimum a 4x increase in every knowledge worker's productivity. I would probably place it at 10x or even higher than that. And so what we think about then is that when you've got workers who are 10 times as productive every day, that pretty soon you're going to start thinking as an entrepreneur or a business owner or a CEO, do we really need more humans in our organization? If every human is 10x as productive every day, do we need a bigger workforce? Of course, there's an age of abundance. We'll create other work and other jobs and other, opportunities and all the rest. But this is a very, very rapid time, a very scary time for many.
But that's what they say. There's a lot of execs that said that they're not worried about jobs being replaced by AI. They actually think there'll be more jobs created. But when you start talking about the disruption that comes into accounting, you think of the big accounting firms. I immediately can picture these giant buildings in most of the cities that probably house a lot of people. I see these big buildings and I don't hold a lot of optimism for the industry having more jobs.
2 comments there. I think one is that you mentioned the word menial and the mundane. I often talk about the fact that AI, yes, did come in to do a lot of the menial and the mundane so that we could actually be liberated as humans to do more of the meaningful and the humane, the organic, the human stuff, the innovation stuff and creativity stuff and creating amazing human content and dialogue. I think that's key. But if I also think about my junior days as a lawyer at Clayton Utz in 333 Collins Street here in Melbourne, they gave me all the shit tasks to do, the menial and the mundane. They're comparing a 1 year's legislation with another year's legislation manually. And the question I asked 20 years ago is, isn't there a piece of software that can do this? And they're like, no, this is what we train our juniors on. And the same holds true for accounting firms. The shit stuff, the menial and the mundane, they give to juniors. And over the years, you train and, you go up the ranks, right? To maybe one day become a partner or whatever it happens to be. But if ChatGPT or other proprietary versions thereof can do all the menial and the mundane stuff, like what's the training data? And what's the training that juniors are going to go through? Because partners will just be like, hey, we don't actually need to do all the fact checking and all of that if we've got a really good proprietary AI that doesn't hallucinate, that can do that for us instead.
So what you said about the kids is pretty interesting. Like when we grew up, we had to learn a lot of things. We were programming and training our own brains to be ready for a world. Kids today aren't training their brains, they're querying. And that's what I see in my kids. I have young daughters. They want to know something. Even this morning, I was like, how do I clean my Apple Pod Air Max things? They smell. And they're like, just watch YouTube. It'll tell you exactly what to do. Someone's done it on TikTok before. Just do it on there. So everything is like querying. There's no trial and error. Across all the different industries, like, are kids going to learn how to code? Are they going to learn to build websites? Like, what's going to happen? Do you think about your kids and go, what are they going to do in the future? Are they just going to be advanced queryers?
Good questions. They're all going to learn prompt engineering, that's for sure. How to interact and interface with the technologies to get the technologies to do your work for you. At least the stuff that's really boring. And I mean, there's a part of me that actually thinks that forcing someone to do really menial and mundane stuff is really inhumane. No, I would say it's actually really inhumane. Maybe venture so far as to calling it abusive, because humans are not robots, right? Now, the origin of the term robot actually comes from the Czech language, and it was used as a descriptor for humans, particularly women who were sitting in the workplace doing extremely robotic, what we now think of robotic style labor, just high routine, boring tasks.
Yeah.
What I get excited about is when we can take the robot out of the human, so that humans can do more meaningful work. Because I don't think anyone was put on this earth to spend 2-3 years just doing menial and mundane robotic style labor. I think there's a lot of human creativity that actually gets quashed because we spend too much time doing these things that are unfulfilling. They drain us of our energy. Imagine the creativity or the entrepreneurship, etc., available within kids. I study my sons who are 6.5 and 2.5, and I see all the amazing creativity, right? Like I live in a national park at Great Mackerel Beach. My son Lucian, who's 6.5, he's like, why are there no restaurants? And we live offshore, right? It's in a national park. So there's no shops, there's no cafes, there's no restaurants. And Lucian's like, yeah, I really like when we go to a cafe, Dad. And I'm like, why are there no cafes at Great Mackerel Beach? And so what does he do? He goes and writes a business plan and draws it on a piece of paper of how he's going to have his little espresso cart at the ferry at Great Mackerel Beach. I mean, that is one little example of just this latent creativity. But then if he gets forced by society to become an accounting graduate and then sit and compare and reconcile numbers and spreadsheets, that creativity can be beaten out of him. And I think that's the opportunity for us to actually rejig education, nourish creativity in kids, and for them to think about how can they be more productive than ever before and liberate their own creativity.
I don't disagree with you, but I'm going to enjoy being the yin to your yang today.
Please,
I'm really going to be
do.
controversial somewhat, even though I would love a future where we have all these creative jobs and we all get to do these things. I'm going to be devil's advocate for a bit because I freaked myself out on the train the other day because I thought this AI was coming in to make the mundane tasks really easy. And everyone was telling me in the AI field that you'll be safe if you're a musician, a masseuse. I even saw in San Francisco they would do nail polish machine that would automatically do your nails for you. So nails aren't safe and the creative industry isn't safe. I created podcast artwork in the time that it took to drink my coffee on the train on the way in, literally between one stop, came up with a piece of art that was better than I could have possibly imagined by simply creating a prompt. And it made me think I would normally go to a designer or I would brief an agency and there'd be multiple people involved and we would enjoy the process. But instead I just do a prompt, it comes back and I go, I have art. If I apply that art now to all the designers in the world, everyone who's developing websites and coding websites, security analysts, even baristas. What's to say I don't end up with an automated coffee machine like the Jetsons? We just made a coffee. It took it, and it was manual.
And it's very impressive.
It was impressive. The process took a while, but we had a conversation around it. But when the machine makes the coffee for us, which it can do, but not very well, and it will in the future make a better one, what happens to your son's dream of having the coffee cart when everyone can get coffee whenever they want? That's my point. Like, if everything is so fast, there just isn't enough jobs for all of these people.
I think what we need to recognize is that what's fundamentally going to be upended, digitized, and done very quickly by robots is mediocre. So in the past, people I know in my entrepreneurial community, for example, in the entrepreneurs organization, a lot of great entrepreneurs. There's also a lot of stingy entrepreneurs who, whenever I go and say, hey, we give each other a bit of feedback and we do gestalt, experiential shares, etc. Sometimes we share contacts for, great designers, etc. And then I see many entrepreneurs trying to, cut corners, and they're like, I'm just going to do a new logo for this new business. I just put it up on Fiverr or Upwork, or I got my virtual assistant in the Philippines to do it. And I'm like, yeah, and it's shit, right? So the mediocre is what's going to get upended, right? There are amazing digital artists, there are amazing graphic designers. They've designed some of my book covers, for example. They're very intelligent, subtle, like for my book Digilog, How to Win the Digital Minds and Analog Hearts of Tomorrow's Customers, for example. My designer in New York, she came up with this beautiful heart that within the heart has these Hanover bars. What are Hanover bars? The Hanover bars we might remember from the 70s and 80s, which was when there was nothing on television. You had a round circle with all the various colors. So there's a subtle piece here of like, there's the, a very analog heart from analog television. Just subtle pieces of artwork like that, or the, FedEx logo where there's like a little hidden white space arrow painting or pointing forward between the Fed and the X, for example. These are subtle nuances that are, subconscious marketing. Mid-Journey is not going to do that today. No. But Mid-Journey today will definitely disrupt. If I need a long slide deck, for example, I'll use my human designer for some of it, and then I'll use Mid-Journey for certain other slide. So yes, there is going to be disruption, but I think it's the disruption of the mediocre, of the Fivers, the Upworks, the content factories in the Philippines and in India, etc. I think they're the ones that are at most risk. I think the encouragement to kids today is just be effing awesome at what you do and nourish your creative skills.
And there's still, let's go back to the accountants. They're still, they're going to be 85%. You said it was able to pass, but you still need interpersonal skills as an accountant to be talking to someone about how the AI has delivered its insights or what you're going to do as an accountant to customize. So I think the level of crap when it comes to logo or image or artwork, even in my example with the podcast, the examples that DALL-E gave me as the image output weren't good enough. And so it gave me a basis, and then I went, no, actually, I need the MCG to look like this. I need Melbourne Football Club to look like this. I need a football. I need a coffee. And so I added to it, and I made it better. So I think what you're saying is, shit will be less shit. Average can elevate above, and it will give us a baseline. So as long as we humans are experimenting and working with these tools, we can get better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when it comes to music and other areas of artwork as well, it's whether it's for a podcast or something else, it's very easy to get something that's non-copyrighted. It's been very easy to get stock image over the years for slide decks, and they just look really bloody boring because they're not unique.
Yeah.
And while Midjourney is certainly a little bit more, I would argue, creative in the sense of what it's rendering and coming up with, you still have to coach it. You still have to prompt it. As a human, we all have to become prompt engineers now to express our own creativity. And I think, as you point out, getting over that procrastination, getting beyond writer's block or singing block or whatever it happens to be, is one of the beautiful gifts of artificial intelligence. I know in terms of my own content, my own newsletters, Decoding Tomorrow, for example, or blogs, etc., LinkedIn, oftentimes I don't feel like coming up with something creative. And I'm like, but I should. I actually know it's good for my business. And I've just found now that I've put in a few little bullet points, whether it's in LinkedIn AI, the generator, for example, or whether it's in my blog post, where I combine OpenAI, ChatGPT, or the HubSpot AI, for example, with, say, a transcript from a keynote that I've done from Google, so it has my tone of voice. And when I sort of overlay all of that and then blend it with a little bit of Midjourney, I'm like, this is still something that's me.
Yep.
It's not just a content factory that's punched this out. It's not just AI doing it without any human oversight, but the human is still very much in the loop.
Yep.
Yeah.
I read this morning, 52% of executives feel that they're not ready for the pace of change, and they feel that this year is going to be the most disruptive ever. And we were chatting over a coffee, and I had the theory on it because it's happening so fast, but it's like the Taylor Swift effect is what I think. Like her catapult into, I only know this because my daughter has basically brainwashed me into everything Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
But it feels like technology now, when something drops, the Apple Vision Pro drops, the whole world is very quickly onto it. And all of a sudden, every business has to scramble. And maybe it's the same thing for AI. What are technology leaders, not even technology leaders, because actually I say technology leaders, I say business leaders, but they're all running technology companies these days because every business is a technology company. Yeah. That's how I see it in my head. How are they going to keep up if they don't feel that they can?
I think there's a lack of a digital growth mindset in organizations, among CEOs, etc. If I reflect back a few years, I used to ask this question of leadership teams and boards, and ask, who led digital transformation in your organization? Was it A, your CEO? Was it B, the CTO? Was it the CIO? Or was it COVID-19?
COVID-19, then CTO.
Yeah. Most people put up their hands and they go, actually, it was COVID-19 that led digital transformation inside of our organization because we had to.
Yep.
Because it was such a future shock.
Yeah.
And with generative AI is going to be a part of every bit of workflow. Every work task will have AI embedded into it. I reckon within the next 12 to 24 months.
Yep.
90% of all content online by next year, 2025, will have been synthetically generated. Yes, some human input, but it's not going to be purely biological, organic human input. There's going to be an AI element to it because somebody might have produced it, in Microsoft Outlook with Copilot. It might have been via LinkedIn with a bit of tweaking from the AI, for example. It might have been Instagram suggesting certain things to boost your post to make it most optimized, etc. So this is massive. And so I think if we think about the pandemic, we now have another type of future shock that is getting very, very close. And I think CEOs, for them not to be put in that spot where people are just like, oh, COVID-19 and external massive environmental factors are the things that actually led digital transformation. Yeah. CEOs and leaders have to become amazing science fiction storytellers. In other words, they have to become futurists. They have to tell an amazing story to build the trust in their organization so that the organization, the people go, yeah, we want to be here as opposed to, tech laggards.
Yeah,
I think that it is such an important point. And storytelling is fundamentally a very, very human skill that we can all practice the art of.
I think on the one part, you're right, like so many businesses pivoted and successfully pivoted during COVID, so it proved that we can do the pivot. I think another massive change is something that people are ready for but reluctant. And I think it's probably the companies that are legacy companies are the ones freaking out the most because they're like, we've just enjoyed an ability to be complacent for a long period of time. And now comes a technology that is fundamentally going to rip this organization apart unless we adapt. And it will be those companies that can adapt the fastest will be the ones that will be the most successful.
Yeah. Listen, I spoke to the leadership team of another professional body that represents knowledge workers. And they shared a little story with me, which is that they had engaged one of the large consulting firms to do a big strategy paper for them on how they can innovatively recruit more members, how they can go after younger professionals within that space and, sign them up and nurture them and have them as members and, continue their CPD points and development within that professional body. Paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for this strategy paper and the input and the advice. And then they ran the same query via ChatGPT and came up with the same answers. So two reflections there is that ChatGPT or other AIs, there are some that are even more strategic. Not only can they come up with pretty good strategic inputs, but the question is also, did the humans in the consulting firm actually do the work? Or did they just do a massive markup based on something that they cross-checked with the artificial intelligence?
Yeah.
Somebody got ripped off in that entire encounter, right?
Yeah.
This is just one example of how knowledge work will be upended. And of course, we have to move with those times. Another reflection is when I was doing work with the Art Gallery of WA last year, they curated a session called Blank Canvas, A Future Without Creatives, which is exactly to your point that AI is now no longer just disrupting the left brain, but equally the right brain of creativity, innovation, and design as well. And I sort of made the comment that the organic, the biological, the digitally verified human creativity will have a premium placed upon it. So let me just expand on that for a moment. We might get mesmerized by, a cool image of, recently some of the memes, for example, are, fast food brands like KFC or Chick-fil-A or
yeah,
is that what it's called in
kids
America?
love that. I don't know why.
but in brutalist communist architecture in Siberia, and Midjourney just renders this and it looks kind of eerie but kind of weird, and some of this stuff is interesting, right? But would I want to listen to or read a piece of fiction entirely generated by an AI. I'm like, nah,
Not really.
not really.
In the same way you wouldn't want to listen to a song created by an AI.
Yeah, I mean,
There's
like,
no feeling, there's no heart to it.
yeah, there's
You
exactly.
can't
There's
channel what the person was going through when they wrote whatever it was that they wrote. So you can't put yourself into that situation. It just feels fake.
And it has a little bit of novelty factor. Like I remember the Gorillas from a few years ago, right? You know, like holograms playing music. You know, maybe some people might go to a concert like that. I feel like the novelty factor also wears off after a little while. And I think particularly in an age where like there's just going to be a content explosion because of generative AI and a creativity explosion, maybe a second renaissance, that where there's a digital or where there's a human fingerprint on this, we're going to value that even more. And so a little, you know, cap nod to a previous technological development was when the camera first made it onto the scene. People particularly in Europe at the time, got really, really nervous because they're like, oh, all landscape artists who paint landscapes are going to be made defunct because, like, why would someone want to buy a Rembrandt when you can just have the photo, which is picture perfect of the Dutch landscape? Like, it's precise. But some of these landscape artists that previously had stood during Dutch winters and painted, you know, a little pond or a channel in Amsterdam, freezing their fingers off outside because they had no reference other than their own memory. They're like, oh, these cameras are pretty good because we can take a photo and then during winter, we can actually be inside and paint what we saw, but, you know, beautifully with like the human imperfection. And so not only did that happen where it became a reference point, a creative reference point for the landscape artists, but also it then led to a new field of human creativity that photographers like Annie Leibovitz and the rest of us are pretty happy about because all of a sudden there was photographic art as well.
Yeah.
And that's how I tend to think about AI. Massive disruptive effect for the mediocre output, but also huge enhancer and augmenter of human creativity as well.
Yeah, and the value, as you were telling that story, I was thinking about the value of those paintings. And even as I think about the vinyl I have on my wall, like vinyl records are now more valuable than when you stream it via Spotify. Paintings are more valuable than the photos you stick on your TV or the fake art that you have lying around. And so it's elevated. And then you can't talk about vision and photos without talking about what just came out, which is the Apple Vision Pro, and it's super polarizing. To me, it's like, I was 100% against it, and then I swung the next day to like, actually, this could be really interesting for society. And I have my reasons, but asking my kids as well, they're polarized by it. I think Apple's done it again. They've landed a product that's made everyone go, stop and think, what's the big deal? What are we going to do with it? What's your take on the Apple Vision Pro?
Well, I mean, I think all the images are emerging now of early adopters walking around like zombies on the streets of New York, crossing streets very dangerously.
Driving Teslas
in automated mode, etc. I think it's... I always treat these things with curiosity, right?
Yeah.
It's polarizing for sure. But I think immersive worlds are potentially very beneficial for humans, from a PTSD treatment perspective, from an anxiety perspective, from a pain treatment perspective. Virtual and augmented reality are already being used in the medical field, for example. So I think that's really important. That's a type of digital nutrition for humans. Right? Content is chemistry wrapped in story and narrative, and there's probably nothing more immersive, failing psychedelics, than actually sitting there with an image that is 360, fully immersive. So there's a lot of positives to it, right? Then when you see people walking around like zombies, the question is also how much are we going to be disconnected from other humans when we're all sitting there in our own little virtual worlds, right? Because the images I'm getting is, almost like junkies walking around on the streets, totally off on a trip, and maybe not always a good one. So it can be also very disconnecting from other human beings as well. So I think it's, again, a bit of yin with the yang.
Yeah, it's good because it's technology that can be really useful, like you said, for medical reasons. Or you think about, like, I saw an example earlier of like someone training to learn how to mechanically maintain a jet engine. Like, you have this giant jet engine and they're training this person and they can visualize how it's supposed to work, or a surgeon can visualize different parts of a body, and these sort of things. And so I think, and the other one that I think like people learning how to do things in a 3-dimension is potentially really amazing. And also connecting with other people, elderly being able to connect, or kids being able to travel and see things in other parts of the world that will help them with learning, because they can really appreciate the nature, the environment. They can almost feel it. I feel like this is something that's amazing. At the same time, I hear what you're saying, like people walking around, it's just the wrong application of the technology. And I had this conversation with my daughter and I said, you know what I actually love? I would love the idea, and I've said this for a long time, watching Australian rules football. It's a big ground. I need to see the entire ground when I'm watching it on the TV. So it'd be amazing to have the headset on and be able to see the entire ground, and then also be able to see the play of what I want to look at. And she said to me, yeah, but Dad, you're doing it on your own. And I went, you're right. Like this is a really solid, like a solo thing that I'm engaging in. And I want to do it with my family and my friends. And that's why we do it as a community in the old sit round a fire and watch the football type thing. So super polarizing. And of course, the early adopters have taken this to an extreme and done some things probably to draw attention to themselves, to the point where the US government had to come out and tell them driving with an Apple Vision Pro is not actually a good thing.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah. So now we're adding, beyond text driving and drink driving, we've also got like Vision Pro driving, or at least hanging out in your Tesla.
Are you going to get one?
Probably. I mean, I tend to think of these things as experiments. So I like technology, of course. I dabble in it.
Let's go as we wrap the podcast. I know you have a flight to catch to Sydney.
Yep.
Finish the sentence. AI will ...
Wow. AI will kill the mediocre. AI will fundamentally disrupt laziness, complacency, and inertia. I feel like this is, together with the climate crisis, is one of the biggest wake-up moments for humanity to adopt AI in an ethical and responsible manner. And the questions we're asking, which are fundamentally existential, with worries about AGI, or artificial general intelligence, gone haywire, and the questions about universal basic income for those that may actually sadly be left behind. These are really, really, really amazing questions to be asking, because this is, I think, humanity's biggest opportunity to not waste, right? If we get this wrong, shame on us as humanity. Because if we can 10x the productivity of every human who is in the workforce, like, we should be able to spread that wealth in an abundant fashion where nobody gets left behind.
Do you worry about the future of humanity as it relates to your kids growing up in a world of artificial general intelligence?
Wow. So there's always the question about what happens if this technology becomes sentient or aware, and I think they are very, very important questions to consider. I know that there's many philosophers and Thought leaders out there are worrying about these types of questions, the existential risk of AGI. I also think, if we look at Isaac Asimov's rules, for example, that a robot and an AI must not harm a human, if we can somehow code that sort of ethics into it, hopefully we don't have an iRobot scenario, but if we can somehow code that into humanity's best interests, that would be pretty amazing. I think as concerned as people are about AI developing sentience, emotions, feelings, senses, I'm equally as worried about humans who don't have those types of empathies and feelings for others. So I think sometimes we need to also look ourselves in the mirrors as humans. Are we being as productive as we can be? Are we being as creative? Are we being as authentic? Are we being as empathetic with our fellow humans? Are we looking after the environment? Sometimes the new technology, the shiny new penny, gets us to actually not reflect as much on ourselves and our own behavior as human beings. And I think for good human beings that do the right thing in a conscious capitalistic way and look after the environment and other human beings, I think we'll be safe into the future. And I hope also for my kids as well.
Like you've taken the path of optimism. It's a nice approach. And I don't know what it was with me today that kept feeling like I wanted to be in the pessimistic instead of the optimistic.
Yeah.
Maybe it was the Negronis last night that we had that gave me some very strange dreams.
I think I always think it's good to be a bit dystopian, to actually trigger ourselves a little bit and think about the worst case scenario and plan for the worst case, but then also to also be prepared for the best case scenario as well, but not to be too overly reliant or ignorant of what might be going on.
Thanks for coming in, mate, and look forward to catching up with you and talking again over a pizza somewhere.
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool, man.
Ciao.